Okay, good morning. Hello and welcome to our series, Making the Right Moves. We're looking at, as you know in the series, the issue of financing for women entrepreneurs. So we're speaking to women who have successfully raised funds for their business. We're going to talk to them about how they did it, what are the lessons learned along the way, and what tips they have to share. So this morning, I'm so happy to welcome Vonnya Pettigrew from Baltimore, Maryland. She's a media mogul, and she's CEO of Root Branch Media Group. They're located at the waterfront in Baltimore, in the Inner Harbor. Now, Vonnya has such an impressive resume that I have to refer to my notes, so apologies for that. She has had over 24 years of professional media experience as a filmmaker, as a writer, as a TV producer, instructor, and casting agent. She's produced content for US government agencies, corporations, universities, and broadcast networks such as Disney, TV One, and Charm TV. She's an alumni of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program. She's a member of several prominent minority organizations here in the US, and she's a former White House intern under the Clinton administration. She's been profiled in several prominent US publications, such as the Bloomberg Quarterly Report and the Baltimore Magazine. And she has been featured both nationally and globally on the Voice of America, WHUR's Let's Talk Money with Taylor Thomas, and the WEAA's Wealthy Radio with Deborah Owens. I'm so pleased to welcome you to this interview, Vonnya.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I know you just had an event on Sunday, which unfortunately I couldn't attend. So could you just tell us a little bit about that before we get into the interview?
Yeah, so we held a brunch here at our new building, the RBMG building. It was a champagne brunch. A colleague of mine who owns a wine concierge club here in Maryland, Vino 301, and I teamed up because this past year I launched a coffee company, and we decided, hey, coffee and wine, we should have a brunch. And as we connect to do this brunch, we should call ourselves the Brunch Babes. And since it was Women's History Month, we wanted to center the focus of our event around women changing the landscape in the beverage industry. So in addition to Leslie and myself, Leslie being the owner of Vino 301, and I'm owning Root Branch Press Coffee and Co. We also brought in Beast Stuyvesant, which is a champagne owned by a Black woman out of Bed-Stuy in Brooklyn, New York. And then we have Faudree, which is a vodka that is owned by a Black woman here in Prince George's County. And so we had a panel discussion, great drinks, great food,
I'm
great
sure.
and amazing networking. So you were definitely missed, but you know, it was such a big success. We're looking forward to doing the Brunch Babes as an ongoing series. So you got to come out to the next.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. I'm so sorry I missed it, but just to say that I'm pleased to have met you basically through the CARES Act Strategic Consulting Fund program that I run. As a vendor in that program, you were very instrumental in not only helping our clients, but also doing the video for the program. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. It was a pleasure and joy to work with you and Juanita and Paul and the team. And again, I don't take any project of any size lightly. I find it an honor any and every time you all choose Root Branch Media Group. And so to be able to work on a project for the city, for the mayor's office, and supporting some incredible businesses throughout our state that are making, you know, waves in their marketplace locally and nationally, and for even some internationally. So it was an awesome opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you again. So why I wanted to interview Vonnya, when I met you in person for the first time when we were working on the video, I was very impressed with your drive, your enthusiasm for your work, your big vision, because I think a lot of times women owners don't tend to think big, and so they limit themselves to what they can do. And this extends to raising money as well, right? Where they sort of think, oh, I just have to kind of raise money in my circle, and they don't think they can go outside that circle and really step up and take risks in terms of where they go to raise these funds. So I wanted to sort of ask you first how you started your business and sort of what is the vision? I know it's a big vision, so let us know what that is.
Well, that's quite honestly, in my early years, I really thought that very same way, being a woman of color, having my own personal challenges or, limitations, if you will, from my background. I wasn't born into wealth. So, I grew in poverty, and I'm from North Philadelphia and, inner city, inner hood, if you will. So there was no money, in that way. And so my early years really was starting the company by doing the work, generating revenue from the contracts, and then putting the profit back into the business and just kind of continued that loop. So to the point where we kind of self-funded ourselves in the early years. And I'm really using self-funding ourselves very, very loosely because there was no money, So although we've been in business for 17 years, we started in 2006, we didn't really hit our stride until much, much later, and it was because of growing and learning about business and learning about the value of things like gaining an MBE, DBE, WBE certification, which are your minority and women-owned certifications, and leveraging some of these other types of schools and programs to position you to be able to get contracting so that you can start conducting business in a different market space that has larger budgets, but when I really first started out, it was, doing videos or things for relationships that I had, or small businesses or small companies that had small budgets, or nonprofits that had small budgets. So, but the point where things really started changing for me was when I started investing in my professional development, investing in business programs, accelerator programs, cohorts, and those types of things. And it was in those circles and in those networks that I started learning, oh, there's a program in the city that offers funding for this. Or the same way, again, we work together with the Funding for CARES Act. A lot of those smaller businesses that were starting out may not have known that there was funding, made available through CARES that can offset some of those initial startup costs. So like many, I didn't start out with a business background, but I knew my industry. So whether you are a baker, baking, you do hair, hair, but you may not know how to run a business. And that's essentially how it was for me. I had a background in television and film. I worked for Discovery Channel and production companies. So I knew how to do the industry, but I didn't know how to do it as my own business entity. And then once I started connecting with professional development and cohort trainings and really learning through those resources and those peer circles of business entrepreneurs, that's how I gained the knowledge to know how to go after grants or certain types of funding or, that sort of thing.
So for you then, the key was networking in the context of these trainings that you did that gave you insights into where the money was. Because you're correct, because a lot of conversations I have with entrepreneurs is that they folks call me, where can I get funding for X or Y? Because for some reason, just generally speaking, this is not unique to Baltimore. I found across the board in countries, there is no central source of information about funding or training or so on. There's sort of a silo kind of arrangement where everybody keeps information in-house, or it's only circulated to their network, but there's no cross-fertilization, if you will,
That's right.
so that, you know, anybody out there will know at a glance what's
Right.
available, you know? So that's part of the issue. But let me just come back to my first question, which was, why did you start your business? I'm curious about that.
So I started my company, again, I've worked in television and film my entire career. I worked for ad agencies, marketing agencies, smaller production companies in Philadelphia, which is my hometown, in Washington, D.C. So I was on K Street, you know, I was in all the right places. And being in Maryland, the big thing, if you're in media, to do is either work on Capitol Hill, in the you know, the press space, or you work for Discovery Channel, or you may work for National Geographic. Those are pretty much the big, but we also have BT as well, you know, so those were the big entities that were in our area, because we're not in New York, we're not in LA, right? So when I was coming up, that's what we had. And so I landed a leadership position at Discovery Channel in Silver Spring. And I thought I had arrived. I made it to the network. This is amazing. You know, I'm going to retire here, you know. And when I got there, I realized it's a corporation, you know. Most of the creative work, the production work, the making of all those shows that we like to watch. Because one thing a lot of people may not know is Discovery Communications is the umbrella. And under Discovery Communications, there are over 100 networks. There are 100 channels. So there's Discovery, there's ID, there's Science, there's Health, there's Animal Planet, there's TLC, you know, Oprah Winfrey Network is on Discovery. Magnolia Network is under Discovery, you know, so it's all these channels that we watch on our cable package, but we don't know that those are all Discovery brands. So I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm getting to work on all of these shows and all of these things. But I get there and I realize I'm at headquarters. I'm the corporate, you know, I work where it's orchestrated, like how all the shows get to air, you know, and then that's when I learned, quite honestly, like you got the peek behind the curtain that it's actually a bunch of production companies around the world that are producing these different shows for these different networks. And they come back to the network, they're customized with the logos and all that kind of stuff. And then it's uploaded to satellite to air from where we were, you know. But it wasn't actually made in the building that I'm, you know, where
yeah.
And so I said, I need to start a production company because make the shows that are, you know, and speaking again about professional development and cohorts and accelerator programs, back then there was a program in Baltimore that was called WEB, Women Entrepreneurs of Baltimore. And I applied for that program. And although I lived in Prince George's County and I was working down in Montgomery County, you know, I was close enough that although, because it was for women entrepreneurs of Baltimore, you needed to be in Baltimore, I pitched my idea. They liked it. I was accepted into that, you know, program. And I came out of that with a business plan. And that's how Root Ranch was formed back in 2006. And so once it was registered and all the things, and I said, well, where am I going to run Root Ranch out of? And living in Laurel at the time, I'm literally halfway in between DC and Baltimore. So I was like, I did the program in Baltimore. Baltimore is where I got my footing. Let me make headquarters in Baltimore. So I found an office space out 2024 St. Paul Street. A little office, and that's where I you know, set down my roots, you know, initially, and from there I've moved several times throughout Charles Village and Mount Vernon and back into my house, you know, and then, you know, and then we made it over to Union Avenue in the Hamden area to now where we are on the brinks of owning a 15,000 square foot building that sits on Baltimore's beautiful Inner Harbor in Canton, Maryland.
I am so proud of you. That's like huge. That's super huge. But let me ask you, looking at the journey, what have been some of the challenges? And talk specifically around financing, if you will.
Well, that was the challenge. Access to capital, because again, even though I was in these programs and I was now learning that the resources available, like I know that there are certain things that you need that need to be in place in order to provide the proper documentation in order to qualify for the funding. So when you're already small and you are just doing the best you can, the best way you can, you may not have an accountant or a CPA firm, certainly not, that is really showing you or preparing for you audited, financials and profit loss statements and balance sheets and all. When I was in these cohorts, I was like, oh my God, this is like mumbo jumbo. I don't even know what these words mean, and that's scary because you don't realize that not only do you need to know what those are, you need to know how to read the numbers on these documents.
Exactly.
To know if your business is healthy or not healthy.
Yes,
or,
you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it.
Yeah.
But you have to understand
You have to understand it.
Yes.
And so even though I may have a beautiful narrative and it's such a beautiful story of how as a small company I grew, when it comes to financing, it still needs to depict that in the numbers. And the numbers tell a story all by itself.
And you have to be able to explain.
Right.
You have to be able to explain the story through the numbers.
Through the numbers. And that's the piece that is the most intimidating for, business owners sometimes, especially when that's not your background. When you know the art, your industry, you're like, I just know what the rent is and how much I pay the BGE bill, but everything else outside of that, you can't really articulate what your profit margins are, what your percentages, like you don't know. And so that's where the challenges lie, because access to capital and having the proper documentation at the ready, where they're updated monthly or quarterly even, so that when you are presented with a grant opportunity from a CARES Act or a EDL program or whatever, you can readily put your hands on your numbers and your paperwork and actually apply and qualify. But the paperwork is so intimidating and daunting that also creates a barrier for, some small businesses that they don't even try to throw their hat in the ring to apply for a grant or to apply for funding.
That's true. And the issue is this too. Say if you're going to a bank, well, let me back up a second. If you have a business where you're selling products, right? It's very easy to figure out profit margins and unit costs and this kind of thing. If you're like us, who have service businesses, it's a little bit more difficult. And also, I think if you're going to a bank, and I don't know if you've had this experience, if you're going to a bank, banks don't understand necessarily how service businesses run. They understand if you have a shop and you're selling widgets, right?
Right.
But if you're saying I'm a consultant and I have X amount of clients and my payments on those clients are not regular monthly things, there are swings in the revenue stream, they don't quite understand that. Right?
So they don't want to take those risks with you.
Exactly. So did you find any of that kind of situation when you were looking for money from banks?
Absolutely. And again, being at a point now where I can have a finance team that, because they know my narrative and they understand the numbers, they help tell the story in a way so when someone's asking for my aging A&R, or whatever the case may be, they're able to show that. And because we, when I mentioned earlier, acquired different certifications and these kinds of things, being able to have, in addition to one-off projects, that sort of thing, having contracts, having contracts on the record that may extend for multiple years, those kind of things give a bank a different level of like, okay, there's some stability here in the money. We haven't even gotten down this road in this conversation yet, but the other piece to it is oftentimes when you're in this growing stage, many of the people that work for you may be contractors and they're 1099s and they're not necessarily W-2 employees. And so being able to explain how much you pay people when the pay is by the project or what, you know what I mean? So it's the same thing, being able to explain the incoming money and how you're spending the money when it's no consistency in the numbers, the amounts, the frequency,
the cash flows are different. It's like being a farmer and having, having cash flows going according to crop harvesting and this kind of thing. It's the same thing when you're a consultant. Unless you have long-term contracts which smooth out your cash flow, you're all over the place.
You're all over the place. And it looks like it's all over the place on paper.
Yeah, but I mean, there's an underlying stability to it. But oftentimes people don't see it. So at what point in your business did you actually approach a bank for financing?
So I teetered with it very early on in the beginning because of the cohort, women entrepreneurs, because it had a board. So there was a bank that was on that board. So they gave us like seed capital and that sort of thing. So I don't discredit them, and because even back then I didn't have $1,500. So thank you for those loans, right?
Yes.
And we were able to pay it off and then maybe get $5,000 and pay it off and get, So that's kind of how my first introduction into capital. But even with that, present your business plan, present, your numbers, your projections, and all of that sort of thing. Where we are now, being able to request capital, we're in a much different place. There's a number of variables at play. Again, we just acquired this property. So this property consists of more business entities. So there's the building itself. The building has tenants. So there's tenant leasing revenues, being able to show that we have tenants willing to pay the X amount of dollar per square foot, which was greater than what its previous use was, those kind of things are attractive to a bank, right? And being able to build my own personal credit so that I can build the business credit makes a difference. But again, our initial starting in this phase of trying to get capital and funding, it was working with more non-traditional entities versus just straight to a bank. I'll give the direct example of one of our first tiers of lending in this phase was LEDC, the Latino Economic Development Center. And
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And although I'm not a Latino,
I know.
They do fund brown people of color as well. And so, to be able to obtain working capital from LEDC, it's an SBA-backed, product, so you're still going through some of those workflows. Coming through pandemic, there was funds made available, whether through PPP or the EIDL, the EIDL, we qualify for some of that type of funding, as well. So being able to show that you're able to attain that kind of capital and manage it well, it makes it, because again, at the end of the day, the lender, the bank, or whoever is looking to see if you have a proven track record of borrowing money and paying it back on schedule, on time. Another source that's not even the bank yet, I use QuickBooks to do our invoicing and our reporting. So one day, out of the blue, I get a notification from QuickBooks that they offer QuickBooks Capital. I never even knew that such a thing existed.
Wow.
And
That's
many
interesting.
people don't know that, but QuickBooks offers, capital based on your books. And because they're QuickBooks, they can see the numbers.
They see the numbers.
Bank,
so what does
it doesn't even hit your credit because they don't need to run all of that because they can see.
They can see the cash flow. Yeah. So what sort of interest rates are we talking about there? Is it better than the banks?
It is really, really good. I'm talking, I've had just giving transparent because I love teaching and just letting folks know what is realistically out there. Through QuickBooks Capital, they've extended credit from 60,000 to 75,000, and again, the payments are automatically pulled once a month
from your
yeah. And but again, very competitive interest rate. Like it's not trying to hurt you. It's really just like, hey, let's give you this added padding to, do what needs to be done. It may be a 18-month or what, you know what I mean, or whatever the case may be, the term. But again, I've been offered it more than once because I may need it in a pinch, to cover payrolls, for example, and then once, because you're doing government contracts, and then when you get your whatever, you can pay it off early, and they'll see that you paid it off early, and then they may extend you another capital offering and increase it because you're paying it off, you don't miss payments, and you are paying it off early.
Mm-hmm.
So from what I know from other businesses, other platforms like a PayPal or whatever also offer their own internal, capital. I don't use PayPal in that way, but from what it sounded like, it sounded very similar to QuickBooks Capital.
So you're basically saying that, because this is important, because a number of businesses, in fact, many of them I talk to, just seem to think, okay, my options are going to a commercial bank or finding a grant, the grant is preferably, obviously, but they don't know that there are these other non-traditional sources out there. Yes. The community lending institutions, for example, here in Maryland and throughout the US, are also sources. So it's interesting that you highlight, because certainly I didn't know anything about QuickBooks having a financing piece.
And I've spoken to CPAs, and they're like, really? I'm like, they just tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, you seem
that means you're doing well.
Yep.
If you're doing well, they tap you.
Yep, they tap you on the shoulder. Yep.
That's interesting. Huh. So have you thought of any other kinds of financing like equity or anything?
Yes. So with our portfolio, particularly with the acquisition of the building, looking to, there were talks, and I was open and flexible enough to consider investors and what does that mean? Like, what do they get for their investment? What percentage of equity or, whether it's voting rights, not voting rights, or obviously maintaining majority ownership and all of those kinds of things. And the good thing of it is, like I said, because of this growth expansion, we have the RBMG building, we have Root Branch Office Solutions, we have Root Branch Media Group, which are our studios, and then there's Root Branch Press Coffee & Co. And we also have a 501c3, which is Root Branch Arts and Outreach Institute. Everything is Root Branch, right?
Of course.
When I'm discussing investment, I don't have to necessarily have the conversation pertaining to my production company. That's still the baby, right? But maybe I would be interested in one of the other entities, investing in the property itself, or investing in what the coffee is doing, or, so there's just other ways to explore how you walk into that lane,
Interesting. Yeah, because a lot of companies who think about equity, especially those who are going into it for the first time with an angel investor, for example, tend to give up too much ownership at the beginning. Because they don't know and they don't understand. Because once you go down that road, once you go down the equity road, if it goes well, particularly, you might want to go to subsequent rounds.
That's right.
Investment. So you don't want to give away too much at the beginning.
That's right.
In the end, even though the valuation of the company might be high,
right,
you would have given away, in terms of percentage ownership, would have given away the store, right?
That's
which you don't want to do.
That's right.
So that's interesting. So this is really going to be an empire, huh?
Yes. And I believe, as I named it RBMG, I believe this will be RBMG Harborside, and there will be other RBMG buildings, whether that's, imagine with me, RBMG Silicon Valley, or
there you go,
Park Avenue, So
why not?
Why not?
Why not? Why not? So let me ask you now. So what have you learned from this journey so far? I mean, you have obviously a long way to go. You have plans to be a franchising thing all over the US, global. But
Yes.
what have you learned so far?
I have learned a lot. And one of the things that I've learned, and this is really more so from a spiritual perspective, is that you can have your own plans, but God has a plan for us. And I believe that the scripture says it, you know, plan to prosper you and to give you hope. And I am living that because I was already in the market to buy. I wanted to, you know, things were growing. We needed a space to work. I didn't want to rent anymore. I said, the next thing I do, we're going to buy a property. Being in a city like Baltimore, where there's different, you know, there's a lot of abandoned buildings and all this sort of thing. Again, my thinking was, let's acquire something like that, rehab it, renovate it, and then create these studio spaces. But God had a different plan for me. And that's not to say that won't happen down the line, but with this particular opportunity, we were making a video project for the company Barcoding, which is what this building used to be. Barcoding had outgrown this space, moved to an even larger building, and their marketing team hired our company to create new promotional videos for their business to show the grandeur and the increased capacity of their new space. And so while I was interviewing, you know, their executive team and their CEO, he and I got to talking, and it was something he said in his interview for the video about, although he's not from Baltimore, because barcoding is all throughout Canada and, you know, the Midwest and, you know, and so he said, even though we're not from here, it's really important to me that we remain headquartered here because I understand what a company of my size does for community, you know, and so they're planted right off of Eastern Avenue, really in the community, you know, and so we talked about that, and I said, I also am not from here, I'm from Philadelphia, and I share in your sentiments about what a business like ours do for community, and so I shared with him that, you know, I was in the market space to be rooted here in Baltimore. And he casually, standing in my 700 square foot studio, he says, oh, well, my old building's for sale and it's not on the market. Make me an offer.
Whoa.
I said, well, what's your old building? And then I'm like, everybody knows this building. Oh my
yes,
God.
okay. And it's right, literally within touching space of the water.
And came over, took a walk through, and that's how he and I began this journey. And although the process has evolved, you know, it started out as a straight purchase, and then we decided to move to a lease to purchase scenario, because he's like, you got to get in that building and do the vision, like your name up there, because again, the revenues, the numbers and all of that, those things did not support the story strong enough to finance and to get us over the finish line. We could have done hard money lending or any of that kind of stuff, but being in the midst of the pandemic, rates are crazy and high. It's like, this
you don't want to borrow money now.
You know, this is supposed to be an opportunity to grow, not put you in a bad situation. And he understood that, and he's like, I'm selling it to you. Like, you don't have to worry. There's no pressure from me, you know.
That's perfect.
So it's like, you get in there and start building the concept. And that's exactly what I've done. I've been here 9 months now. And now it's a very different story when I talk to the bank, because it's not a projection. I have carried the bills for 9 months, and we do have tenants paying the per dollar square footage that we projected that we could get with our new use of the space. The entertainment, the television industry has been responding and have been coming. So we're already showing that people are going to come from other known media places, Philadelphia, New York, Atlanta, to do work in Baltimore. So
using your space. That's
using
perfect.
our space.
That's perfect.
So now it's a very different story to tell, because it's not a maybe. We're really doing it, and we're doing it before we've even renovated it and turned it into the media resort I believe it's going to be.
Well, that shows that there's a demand for what you're offering, right? Yes. Because even I think you mentioned to me too that you want to have shared space for folks in media
That's
want to
right.
do a little video or so on, they can use the space.
That's right. So HBO, Netflix, all of these networks already produce so much of their shows here. Now you guys don't need to camp out in the production truck or set up at a hotel. You know, you actually have a media space where you can have offices to work from, access to conference room, and in our studio space, access to the edit suites to transfer your footage. And you know, you can do a lot of the stuff that you do in the field, but do it in a facility that's already equipped. It's industry standard to, you know, to fulfill your needs.
That's perfect. Perfect. I'm very happy with this vision, Vonnya. I see it.
Thank you.
I see it. I'm going to ask you now, as we're winding down, what are sort of 3 bits of advice that you pass on, specifically about finance? But if you want to talk more broadly, that's fine as well.
Sure. Get your credit together. You know, when I was younger, I was like, my credit doesn't really, you know, you just think you're gonna live forever and this whatever, you know. Okay, you got something bad on my credit, it'll be off in 7 years or whatever they say. You know, you got time. Get your credit together. Get your credit together, because your credit worthiness is the money, because they spend larger sums of money based on your revenues and your credit worthiness, your demonstrated ability to pay and repay. That's all they need to know. Are we going to get our money back? So
yes,
that's really what your credit is saying. Will I get my money back? Yes, and it's going to be great. You know, so get your credit together. Take that seriously. Invest in professional development, whether finding an accelerator program, a cohort, or something. Because again, I've gone through Goldman Sachs 10KSB. I'm currently in the Baltimore's leadership. In each tier, it just takes me to a different level in my development, and it puts you in the room with others that are doing it at a different level as well. I find it an extreme honor to be a member of the leadership, because the leadership has been around for 40 years, and it is comprised of literally the power of the city, from politicians to C-suite execs, representing all the names that we know, all the high-rise, sky-rise companies that we know along this waterfront, and to know that I am there in the same room, but as root branch, you know, to know that it is viewed and respected in that same, you know, level. It's a different level of confirmation and validation, and you're able to conduct business with these entities, which again leads to generating revenue, and revenues at larger budget size. And the last thing I would say is, and I said this actually on Sunday at the brunch, someone on the panel said, if you're thinking about starting a business, if you're thinking about, just do it. And then I added to the just do it to say, and do it where you are, because sometimes we wait because we feel like everything has to be perfect. I got to get this degree, I got to get this certification, I got to get this, you know, do it where you are. I literally held the event in the building in the middle of construction, you know, so the walls have primer on it, you know, and it looks kind of weird, but it inspired the women even more. Like, ma'am, this is your building. And
yeah, there you go. You
know, like, so
yeah,
where you are, like, don't wait. Like, just, you know, like, sometimes we're just too hard on ourselves, and maybe it's a stall tactic as well. But, you know, I said, I'm moving in now, even though we hadn't closed yet, and we're going to do the thing that I'm saying is going to do before it even becomes the thing. Because it's already the thing.
Because when I came down there and I saw the building, I'm like, Vonnya, you need to do something, do an event.
You said it.
Because I'm saying, I talked about the coffee tasting specifically.
That's right.
But I thought if you could get people into this space, then they would buy into your vision, right?
That's right.
And you never know where that would go, you know, tenants, possibilities, contacts.
All of the things, yep. You know? You were absolutely right. And we give tours, we give walkthroughs, and it's almost like people come after they have experienced it. They're trying to make up ways to be in the building, to
there
work,
you go.
ways, you know.
Yeah. No,
Which
it's
is
true.
amazing.
It's true. That's great. So,
Yeah.
Vonnya, this has been really a fabulous conversation. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate what you're trying to do. I think you're an inspiration to me, and others out there, I'm sure, who know you, and even people are going to watch this video. I think you'll be inspiring to them. So thank you so much. Of course, we'll be in touch. I'll be following your journey. I'll be sure to come to the next event.
Yes.
And enjoy the day and all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Take care.